Christmas Eve should have been about joy and family. But when Lorraine Reed found her grandfather shivering outside in the snow while her family laughed inside, everything changed. What followed wasn't just a confrontation, it was a battle for dignity, justice, and the kind of revenge no courtroom could silence. The plane touched down in Rochester just as night settled over the city. Snowflakes swirled beneath the glowing airport lights, the whole place looking like a winter postcard. I clutched my carry-on and smiled to myself, my heart buzzing with anticipation. It was Christmas Eve, and I had planned the perfect surprise for my family. They had no idea I was flying in. I imagined the look on their faces when I walked into the party, the hugs, the laughter, the warmth. For weeks, I'd counted down to this moment. The cab ride through the city only heightened my excitement. Houses glowed with Christmas lights, rooftops draped in glittering icicles, inflatable Santas bobbing in the icy breeze. Families walked hand in hand, bundled in scarves and mittens, their laughter spilling into the streets. Rochester looked alive, joyful, like a festive painting. My heart swelled as I thought, this is exactly what the holidays are about: togetherness, love, family. But when the cab pulled into my parents' driveway, a strange chill spread through me that had nothing to do with the weather. The house stood tall and bright, its windows glowing with golden light. From the front, I could hear faint music, clinking glasses, and bursts of laughter. It should have been comforting, but something made me hesitate. I paid the driver, grabbed my bag, and instead of heading to the front door, I slipped quietly around the side of the house. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the little voice inside me whispering, wait. The backyard crunched beneath my boots, the snow swallowing every sound but the pounding of my heart. And then I saw him, my grandfather. He stood there in the dark, hunched and frail, his thin body trembling against the bitter Rochester cold. His white hair was tousled, his face pale beneath the flicker of the Christmas lights.
He had no coat, no blanket, nothing to shield him from the biting wind.
His eyes darted around, wide with fear, confusion, and something worse, despair. My stomach twisted so violently I nearly doubled over. This wasn't just wrong, it was cruel. My grandfather, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had taken me fishing at Lake Ontario, who had read me stories of his Navy days, was standing outside on Christmas Eve like he didn't matter. Inside, I could hear the muffled clink of champagne glasses. My parents and sister were gathered by the fireplace, their voices bright and cheerful. Laughter floated out as if nothing was wrong. They looked happy, comfortable, warm. And yet, just steps away, my grandfather was shivering like a forgotten shadow. I rushed forward, my breath sharp in the icy air. "Grandpa!" I whispered, wrapping my scarf around his shoulders. His hands reached for mine, trembling so violently I could feel the bones beneath his skin. "It's me, Lorraine," I said, my voice cracking. He blinked up at me, his lips forming words I couldn't quite hear. The cold had stolen his strength. His fingers clutched mine desperately, as if I were the only anchor he had left in the world. Rage surged through me. How long had he been out here? Why had no one checked on him? I slipped an arm around him, guiding his fragile frame toward the back door. Each step crunched in the snow, my pulse thundering louder than the party music inside. When I peeked through the window, the sight made my blood boil. There they were, my parents and my sister, faces glowing in the firelight, champagne flutes in hand, looking smug and content. Oblivious, heartless. I gritted my teeth and pushed the door open. The warmth of the house rushed out, but it felt colder than the snow. Conversation stopped instantly. Glasses lowered. Every eye turned toward us. Shock flickered across their faces, but not shame. Not even guilt, just annoyance. I tightened my hold on Grandpa, my voice trembling with fury. "You left him outside, in the cold." On Christmas Eve, the silence that followed cut deeper than any blade. The room went dead silent as I helped Grandpa onto the couch. His breaths were shallow, his hands still shaking beneath my scarf. I could feel the weight of every stare on me, my father's narrowed eyes, my mother's pinched lips, my sister's mocking smirk. The glow of the fireplace behind them felt like a cruel joke, warmth reserved only for themselves. "What's he doing in here?" My sister snapped, tossing her champagne flute onto the coffee table with a clink. I ignored her, focusing on Grandpa. His pulse was weak, his skin icy under my fingers.
He looked so small, so fragile, it broke something inside me. You left him out there?
My voice cracked, equal parts disbelief and rage. My father shrugged, as if I had accused him of something trivial. He's fine. He just gets dramatic with that Parkinson's of his. Dramatic? I repeated, my voice rising. He can't even hold a spoon without shaking, my mother added, sipping her drink. Her tone was dismissive, dripping with disdain. We're not his nurses, Lorraine. And then my sister chimed in, her laughter sharp as glass. Why keep the old man around?
He's useless. The words slammed into me like a punch. Useless, that.
Was how they saw him, the man who had raised me with bedtime stories, who had patched up my scraped knees, who had taught me patience by the lake. To them, he was nothing but a burden, an inconvenience. My blood boiled. I wanted to scream, to shake them, to force them to see the cruelty in their words. But instead, I focused on Grandpa, who sat trembling, his eyes lowered as if he believed every word they said. I knelt beside him, my voice soft. You're not useless, Grandpa. Not to me. He squeezed my hand weakly, his lips parting as if to speak, but no sound came. That silence broke me even more than their insults. We're leaving, I said firmly, rising to my feet. My father scoffed, crossing his arms. You're overreacting. He's not your responsibility, Lorraine. Don't make a scene. A scene? He thought this was about embarrassment? I clenched my fists, my jaw tight with fury. You left your own father outside in the snow. That's not just neglect, it's cruelty. My mother rolled her eyes. Oh, stop being dramatic. You've always been too sentimental. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed my coat, draped it over Grandpa's shoulders, and helped him to his feet. His legs wobbled, but I held him steady, guiding him toward the door. You walk out with him. Don't bother coming back, my father barked, his voice like ice. I stopped at the doorway, turning to face them one last time. You already lost me the moment you abandoned him. With that, I pushed the door open. The winter air stung my face, but the fire in my chest kept me warm. Snowflakes clung to my hair as I guided Grandpa down the steps, his weak breaths misting the night air. I drove us to the only place open that night, a small hotel off the main road. The clerk, wide-eyed at the sight of Grandpa's frail frame, quickly gave us a quiet room. I settled him into a chair, tucking a blanket around his shoulders, watching as the fear in his eyes slowly gave way to exhaustion. You're safe now, I whispered, brushing his hair back. His lips trembled, and finally he found his voice. Thank you, Lorraine, he whispered, barely audible. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. I wouldn't cry, not now. I pulled out my phone and dialed Stephen Brooks, my closest friend from college, a nurse who had always been my rock. Stephen, it's urgent, I said the second he answered. Grandpa's in bad shape. Can you come to the hotel? I'm on my way, he said without hesitation. As I waited, I sat beside Grandpa, holding his hand as he sipped water with trembling fingers. My mind replayed the cruel laughter, the words useless, burden, embarrassing. Each one fueled the fire inside me. This wasn't just a bad night. This wasn't just neglect. It was betrayal, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The next morning, I brought Grandpa to my apartment. My small space was cluttered with books, lesson plans, and half-graded papers, but it felt like a sanctuary compared to the cold indifference of my parents' house. I settled him on my worn couch, tucking a blanket around him. His hands still trembled, but his eyes seemed calmer as he studied the family photos on my wall, snapshots of students, friends, and memories from a life he'd helped shape. I handed him a mug of tea, steadying his grip as he raised it to his lips. Watching him struggle to hold something as simple as a cup, I felt a heavy guilt settle in my chest. How long had I ignored the signs? How long had I let my family's dismissive words blind me to what was happening? As Grandpa sipped, my mind wandered back to summers at Lake Ontario.
He'd sit with me on the dock, his strong hands guiding mine as we cast fishing lines into the still water.
Patience, Lorraine, he'd say, his voice calm and steady. Good things come to those who wait. He'd tell me Navy stories too, about storms he'd survived, about the friends who became family on the sea. Back then, he seemed invincible. But now, hunched on my couch, his shoulders frail and his once steady voice wavering, he looked like a shadow of the man I remembered. When did this happen? I whispered to myself. When had my family stopped seeing him as a father, a grandfather, a man, and started treating him like a burden? The truth came slowly, piece by piece, like a puzzle I hadn't wanted to put together. I remembered 2 years ago, when his tremors worsened. At a family dinner, he dropped a glass, and my father muttered, "Always making a mess." My mother sighed, saying his shaking made her nervous. My sister, obsessed with her social image, stopped inviting him to events altogether, calling him an embarrassment. At the time, I told myself they were being careless, not cruel. I was busy with teaching, grading, lesson planning. Life moved fast, and I didn't stop to see the pattern forming. But now, sitting across from him, the truth was undeniable. They hadn't just neglected him, they'd abandoned him. Grandpa's voice broke through my thoughts. "I didn't want to be a burden," he said softly, his eyes wet. I dropped to my knees in front of him, taking his shaking hands in mine. "You're not a burden, Grandpa. You never were. You never will be." His lips quivered into a faint smile, but it only deepened the ache in my chest. That evening, Stephen arrived with his medical bag. He examined Grandpa carefully, blood pressure, pulse, hydration. His brow furrowed as he worked. "He's dehydrated," Stephen said quietly, "and the stress he's been under is obvious. This isn't just Parkinson's, it's neglect." Prolonged neglect. The words hit me like a punch. Neglect. I had thought it. But hearing Stephen, a professional, confirm it made it real. "Can you document everything?" I asked. Stephen nodded firmly. "Absolutely. If this goes further, and you'll need proof." I swallowed hard, resolve tightening in me. "Then we start now." We weren't alone. A day later, Helen Walsh, our neighbor, knocked on my door. She looked nervous, her coat still dusted with snow, but her eyes were steady. "I saw him that night, Lorraine," she said. "I saw your grandfather in the backyard." I can't keep quiet about it. Her words filled me with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. Gratitude because someone else had witnessed what I had. Sorrow because my family's cruelty had been visible to others and still no one in that house cared. Helen's voice sharpened as she added, "I've seen it before too. Not just Christmas Eve. They've left him outside more than once." My stomach twisted. More than once. I felt my jaw clench, my fists balling at my sides. Stephen returned later with another idea. We should check his medical records. Missed appointments, unpaid prescriptions, anything that shows a pattern of neglect. The thought made my blood run cold. I remembered the times I'd visited, noticing Grandpa in old clothes, his prescriptions only half filled. I had brushed it off as forgetfulness or financial strain, but what if it wasn't forgetfulness? What if it was deliberate? That evening I sat with Grandpa asking gentle questions about the past year. At first he hesitated, as if ashamed. But slowly the truth spilled out. "My son, he stopped driving me to therapy, said it wasn't worth it." His voice trembled. "Your mom, she'd lock me out of the living room. Said I ruined family time." My chest tightened. "And your sister," he whispered. "She told me once to stop shaking. Or stay out of sight." Every word was like a dagger. I scribbled notes with trembling hands, fury burning through me. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't oversight. It was deliberate. It was cruel. I looked at Grandpa, his eyes weary, his body frail, and I made a silent vow. Whatever it took, whatever it cost me, I would protect him. Stephen and I spent that night at my kitchen table, stacks of papers between us. "I know a social worker," he said, "someone who can connect you with elder care advocates. But we'll need solid evidence." Helen returned with something that made my blood run hotter. Screenshots. She had overheard my sister bragging to a friend about keeping Grandpa in line. Worse, she had screenshots of a group chat where my mom and sister mocked his tremors, calling him a shaky liability. I stared at the messages, my hands trembling not with fear, but with rage. This wasn't neglect born of ignorance. It was disdain, malice. "They think they can get away with this," I said, my voice low but steady. Stephen leaned forward. "Then let's make sure they don't." That night, as Grandpa slept peacefully in the next room, I sat awake, staring at the evidence spread across my table. Medical records, notes, text messages. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about justice. And justice was coming. A few days later, I knew I couldn't avoid it anymore. Grandpa needed his belongings, his clothes, his photos, his Navy medals, the pieces of his life that made him feel like himself. Leaving those things behind at my parents' house felt like letting them win. I refused to let my family strip him of his dignity. The Rochester streets were quiet, the holiday glow already fading as the new year approached. But inside me, the storm hadn't settled. My grip tightened on the empty duffel bag sitting in the passenger seat as I pulled into my parents' driveway. My stomach twisted, but my resolve was stronger. The front door was unlocked. Typical. I stepped inside without knocking. The house smelled faintly of pine from the still-standing Christmas tree, but the warmth I used to associate with home was gone. My father stood by the coffee table, sorting through paperwork. My mother lounged on the couch, her eyes glued to her phone. My sister was sprawled in an armchair, flipping through a glossy magazine, her designer boots propped up like she owned the world. They looked up in unison, startled as if I were the intruder. "I'm here for Grandpa's things," I said, my voice steady despite the anger boiling beneath it. My father set his papers down, his jaw tightening. "You're making a fool of yourself, Lorraine," he said sharply. Taking him away like that, stirring up drama. "You're tearing this family apart." I clenched the duffel bag strap in my hand. "No, Dad, you did that when you left him to freeze outside." On Christmas Eve, my mother let out a cold laugh, a sound that cut through me like glass.
He's dragging us down, Lorraine. His shaking, his complaints. It's embarrassing.
"We have a reputation to uphold." My sister tossed her magazine aside and smirked. "Honestly, why are you so obsessed with him? He's useless now." "Just accept it." Her words sliced through me. Useless. Again, that word burned like acid in my chest. I stepped closer, my voice low but sharp. "You're ashamed of him because he doesn't fit your picture-perfect image. Because he can't hide his Parkinson's. Because he reminds you that life isn't always pretty." My father's face reddened. "We spent thousands on his meds last year, Lorraine. Don't pretend we haven't done enough." "Enough?" I snapped. "You call abandoning him in the snow enough? You've spent money, sure, but you've given him nothing that matters. No respect. No compassion. No love." I turned toward the hallway, but my sister jumped up, blocking my path. Arms crossed, chin high, she sneered. "You don't get to just take his things and make us look bad. You're not the hero here." I stared her down, pulse hammering in my ears. "Move!" She hesitated, her smugness faltering under the steel in my voice. Finally, she stepped aside, muttering under her breath. I pushed open Grandpa's door, and my heart sank. His bed was unmade, his clothes stuffed carelessly into a corner. His Navy medal symbols of service and sacrifice were tossed into a drawer like trash. My chest tightened with fury as I began packing. Sweaters, photos, medals, every item I shoved into the duffel bag only hardened my resolve. A knock sounded at the front door. My mother answered, irritation in her voice, but the moment I heard who it was, my heart leapt. Helen Walsh. She stood in the doorway, her coat dusted with snow, her eyes sharp with quiet fury. "I saw Lorraine come in," she said firmly. Then she looked past my mother, straight into the living room. "And I know what you did to Vernon," my father scoffed. "This is private, Helen. Stay out of it." But Helen didn't flinch. "I saw him that night, shivering in the backyard. And I'll tell anyone who asks." My mother rolled her eyes. "You're exaggerating." Just like Lorraine. I stepped into the hallway, duffel bag over my shoulder. My voice rose, steady and unyielding. "No, she's not exaggerating. She saw it. I saw it. And I won't let you get away with this." Helen's gaze met mine, strong and supportive. "I'll back you up, Lorraine," she said softly. "You're not alone in this." For the first time, my family's smug expressions faltered. My father's smirk turned brittle. My mother's phone slipped slightly in her hand. My sister's eyes darted away, unsure. I seized the moment. "This isn't over," I said. "You're going to answer for what you've done. In court." My father let out a hollow laugh, trying to recover his composure. "You think you can win against us? Good luck." But I wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. Helen and I walked out together into the cold night. As the snow crunched under our boots, she leaned close and whispered, "You're doing the right thing." I nodded. my chest tight with determination. My family thought they could bully me into silence. They were wrong. This was just the beginning. The Rochester courthouse loomed gray and unwelcoming against the February sky. The bitter wind cut through my coat as I guided Grandpa up the stone steps. His grip on my arm was shaky but firm, his determination matching my own. Every step echoed with purpose. We weren't just walking into a courtroom. We were walking into a war. Inside, the air buzzed with whispers. Families shuffled through the hallways, lawyers carried stacks of files, and the cold scent of polished wood filled the space. But all I could see was the bench at the front of the courtroom, and the row where my family sat waiting. My father, his suit crisp, his posture confident. My mother, composed, her lips pressed into a line that hinted at smugness. My sister, draped in designer clothes, scrolling through her phone as if the whole thing bored her. They looked untouchable, powerful, but I wasn't afraid. Rachel, my lawyer and an old friend from college, placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "We've got this," she whispered. Her eyes were sharp, her tone steady, but I caught the flicker of caution in her face. We had spent weeks gathering evidence: Stephen's medical documentation, Helen's testimony, Dr. Morgan's psychological assessment, and the damning text messages Helen had intercepted. It wasn't perfect, but it was strong. Strong enough, I thought, to finally hold my family accountable. The judge entered and the room hushed. My heart pounded in my chest as the proceedings began. Rachel opened with clarity and force. "Your Honor," she said, her voice carrying across the courtroom, "this case is not about a simple family dispute. This is about deliberate neglect and emotional abuse of an elderly man. Vernon Ramsey, a veteran and grandfather, was left outside in freezing conditions on Christmas Eve. His health records show missed appointments, unpaid prescriptions, and signs of prolonged neglect. This was not an accident. It was a pattern." Her words rang out like thunder. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Rachel presented Dr. Morgan's report, detailing Grandpa's emotional distress, his anxiety, his feelings of worthlessness, his trauma from being abandoned. She followed with Stephen's clinical notes, showing dehydration, untreated stress, and a dangerous lack of consistent medication. She handed the judge the USB drive containing the cruel text messages where my mother and sister mocked his tremors, calling him a shaky liability. The courtroom grew quiet as the words were read aloud. Even strangers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I glanced at Grandpa.
He sat still, his hands folded tightly, his eyes damp.
For a moment I thought we had them, but then their layer rose. A slick man in an expensive suit, his voice smooth as silk. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is riddled with exaggerations and emotional manipulation. The Reeds are a respected family in this community. They have provided care for Vernon, costly care. Thousands of dollars spent on medication, transportation, food, and shelter. What we have here is not abuse. It is a granddaughter who has blown isolated incidents into a vendetta." He gestured toward me with a practiced flourish. "Lorraine Reed is emotional, unstable, and seeking attention. She would rather tarnish her own family's name than accept the reality of an aging man's condition." My father took the stand, calm and collected. "We've done nothing wrong," he said confidently. "My father's condition has been difficult, yes. But we paid for his medication, took him to appointments when we could. Lorraine is exaggerating. She always was dramatic." I felt heat rush to my cheeks, fury bubbling in my chest. Dramatic? He had left his own father in the snow, and now he was painting me as the problem. My mother followed, her tone icy but controlled. "We love Vernon," she insisted, "but Parkinson's makes him unpredictable.
He gets confused. Sometimes he puts himself outside."
Lorraine twists everything. My fists clenched under the table. Lies. All lies. The worst blow came when their star witness, Karen Walsh, Grandpa's former caregiver, was called to the stand. She avoided my gaze as she swore in, her expression flat. "Vernon was well cared for," she said evenly. "The Reeds always provided what he needed. He was often confused and forgetful. Sometimes he made things up." I felt my stomach drop. Her words were a dagger. Rachel pressed her hard in cross-examination, asking why she had quit suddenly, but Karen remained vague, citing personal reasons. Helen leaned toward me, whispering, She's been paid off. I saw her with your dad last week. The pieces clicked and my chest tightened. Of course, money, influence. My family had bought her silence. Helen herself testified next, her voice firm and clear. I saw Vernon outside that night, shivering in the snow. I saw him neglected on more than one occasion. No one should treat their family like that. But their lawyer pounced, painting Helen as a nosy neighbor with a grudge, suggesting she exaggerated out of spite. The judge scribbled notes, his face unreadable. Stephen testified too, presenting medical records of Grandpa's missed appointments and lapses in medication. This is neglect, he said plainly. There's no other explanation, but again the defense twisted it. Clerical errors, they argued. A common issue in busy clinics, nothing more. Finally, it was my turn. I took the stand, my hands trembling at first, but my voice gaining strength as I spoke. I told the court what I saw the cold night, the cruel words, the way my family mocked and abandoned Grandpa. My voice cracked, but I pressed on. They called him useless, a burden. They left him outside to suffer. That is not care. That is cruelty. I thought my words might break through, but the judge interrupted. Miss Reed, he said firmly, emotional testimony is not evidence. Please restrict your comments to factual observations. My heart sank. I wasn't being heard. The trial dragged on, each piece of evidence we presented dismissed, each truth twisted into something else. The judge's expression never changed. My family's confidence never wavered. Finally, after hours of arguments, the judge delivered the verdict. His tone was flat, almost disinterested. The court finds insufficient evidence of intentional mistreatment. Vernon Ramsay may continue to reside with his granddaughter, Lorraine Reed, but no further action will be taken. The words hit me like a blow. My breath caught in my throat. That was it. After everything? After all the evidence, all the witnesses, all the pain, there would be no punishment. My family exhaled in relief, their smugness radiating across the room. My father adjusted his tie with a smirk. My mother leaned back in her chair, satisfied. My sister even had the audacity to yawn. I sat frozen, disbelief washing over me. They had won, again. Rachel touched my arm gently. We got him out, she whispered. That's something, but it didn't feel like enough. They had walked free, their cruelty unpunished. As we left the courtroom, Grandpa squeezed my hand. His voice was quiet, but steady. You tried, Lorraine. You did everything you could. Tears pricked my eyes. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I'm not done trying, Grandpa, I whispered. Because deep down I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a different kind of justice. The courthouse may have failed us, but Rochester had eyes and a conscience. Barely a week after the verdict, whispers began spreading. It started with Helen, who shared what she'd seen with a local reporter she trusted. She never mentioned my name or Grandpa's directly, but in a tight-knit community like ours, it didn't take long for people to connect the dots. The newspaper headline was stark and unforgiving. Elder neglect allegations rock respected local family. The article painted a chilling picture of an elderly veteran left outside in the cold on Christmas Eve while his family celebrated indoors. Names weren't printed, but Rochester wasn't that big. Everyone knew who the respected family was. By the time the article made its way online, the story spread like wildfire. On social media, outrage poured in. Posts on Facebook and X condemned the cruelty, calling my father a heartless businessman, my mother a selfish socialite, and my sister a spoiled brat. Comment sections filled with anger. Who does that to their own father? Money can't buy you morals. I hope the community never lets them forget this. At first, I tried to ignore it, focusing on Grandpa's recovery at my apartment, but one evening curiosity got the better of me. I scrolled through the posts, reading every furious comment. My heart felt heavy, but also vindicated. The courtroom may not have punished them, but the world outside was starting to. The backlash hit my father first. His construction business had thrived for years on big contracts and loyal clients. But ethics matter even in business. Within days, one of his largest clients, a prominent real estate firm, canceled a 7-figure contract. They cited ethical concerns after the article's publication. More cancellations followed. By the end of the month, his once booming company was bleeding money. He called me one night, his voice shaking with fury. "You've shamed us all, Lorraine," he spat through the phone. "This is your fault. Do you understand? Your fault." My hands trembled, but not from fear. I swallowed hard and hung up without saying a word. He had brought this on himself. Then it was my mother's turn. She had worked as a hospital administrator, her job giving her a sense of authority and control she relished. But hospitals value their reputations. Whispers in the hallways grew louder, colleagues avoiding her in the cafeteria, nurses giving her cold stares. Within weeks she was called into a meeting and quietly let go. She texted me afterward, her words bitter. "This isn't fair. You've ruined my career." I didn't reply. Fair? What she had done to Grandpa was the definition of unfair. And my sister, always obsessed with status, appearances, and being the center of attention, faced her own downfall. Invitations to galas dried up. Friends stopped calling. She went from posting glamorous photos on social media to silence. The same circles that once admired her now whispered behind her back, calling her heartless. For the first time in her life, she was invisible. I didn't revel in their destruction, not entirely. The truth was, cutting ties with my family hurt. There were nights when I lay awake, wondering how the people who raised me could have turned into strangers I no longer recognized. But every time I looked at Grandpa, safe on my couch, sipping tea under a warm blanket, I knew I had made the right choice. The community, however, wasn't done making its judgment. At the grocery store, I overheard people murmuring about the Reeds. At church, where my parents once sat proudly in the front row, parishioners now avoided them, their smiles forced and cold. Neighbors who once waved now crossed the street. And slowly, the whispers turned into something bigger. A local blog ran a piece on elder neglect, using our story as an example, again without names. It urged families to check in on their elderly relatives, to ask hard questions, to pay attention. That post was shared hundreds of times, sparking conversations across the community. At the senior center, where Stephen had connected me with a support group, people started opening up. One woman admitted her daughter rarely visited. Another man confessed he feared being a burden to his children. Our story hour pain gave them permission to speak out. It hit me then, justice wasn't just about punishing my family. It was about shining a light, making sure others couldn't get away with the same cruelty. But the irony wasn't lost on me. My family had obsessed over their reputation, their image, their standing in Rochester. And now that very reputation had been stripped away. No jail sentence, no fine could have cut deeper than the public shame they now endured. One night, as I helped Grandpa settle into bed, he looked at me with tired eyes. "They're suffering now, aren't they?" he asked quietly. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Grandpa." "They are." He closed his eyes, a faint sigh escaping his lips. "Good, but don't let their pain be your joy, Lorraine. Let your joy come from knowing you did right by me." His words stayed with me. I didn't need revenge for myself. I needed peace, for him, for us. Still, as I lay awake that night, I couldn't help but think. They had valued money, status, and appearances above everything else. And now those very things were crumbling around them. That wasn't my doing. That was karma. And karma, it seemed, had perfect timing. By early March, the sharp Rochester winter still clung to the city, but inside my apartment something warmer had taken root. Grandpa was beginning to find his rhythm again, piece by piece, day by day. I rearranged the living room to make space for his Navy medals and framed photos. They weren't just decorations. They were anchors, reminders that he was more than his illness, more than the cruel labels my family had thrown at him. Every morning he'd sit at the kitchen table, his hands trembling as he flipped through a book or tried the crossword. The tremors never went away, but the haunted look in his eyes was slowly fading. Stephen visited regularly, checking Grandpa's vitals and making sure his medication stayed consistent. The difference was clear. With proper care and compassion, Grandpa grew stronger. He still struggled, but he no longer looked like a man abandoned. He looked like a man finding his place again. Helen became a constant presence, too. Sometimes she'd stop by with groceries or just sit with Grandpa listening to his Navy stories. Her friendship had become a lifeline for both of us. One evening as we shared coffee, she smiled softly. Vernon's got a spark again. You can see it in his eyes. The biggest turning point came when I brought Grandpa to the senior support group Stephen had recommended. At first, he was hesitant, clutching my arm tightly as we entered the community center. But the group welcomed him with open arms. Retirees laughed over coffee, played cards, and swapped stories. Grandpa's face lit up as he traded Navy tailies with a veteran named Carl. For the first time in months, I saw him smile, really smile without hesitation. From then on, the group became part of his weekly routine. He had people who listened, people who valued him, people who reminded him that he wasn't alone. One evening I watched as he showed Carl's grandson how to tie a fishing knot, his trembling hand steady with purpose. Tears stung my eyes, but this time they weren't from sorrow. They were from relief. Justice hadn't come from a judge's gavel. It had come from here, from love, care, and community. Grandpa wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. In the quiet moments, when the apartment was filled only with the soft hum of the heater and the faint rattle of Grandpa's teacup, I thought about everything that had happened. The courtroom had failed us. The judge had dismissed my words as emotional, the evidence as inconclusive. For weeks I had felt like justice had slipped through my fingers. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized something important. Justice wasn't always about courtrooms or verdicts. Sometimes justice was about community, about people refusing to look away. The whispers that had once been private turned into a chorus of outrage, stripping my family of the very things they valued most: their money, their reputation, their status. They had wanted to appear perfect, untouchable. Now they were defined by what they had done, and Grandpa, he was no longer invisible.
He was no longer the man left to shiver in the cold.
He was Vernon Ramsey, Navy veteran, fisherman, storyteller, and most importantly, my grandfather. He had a place, he had people who cared, and he had the dignity my family had tried to steal from him. As I sat beside him one evening at the community center, listening to him laugh with Carl and Helen over a potluck dinner, I realized this was the real victory, not punishment, not revenge. It was giving him back his life. And maybe, just maybe, giving myself back mine too. The judge may not have punished my family, but life did. They lost their reputation, their careers, and their comfort. Meanwhile, Grandpa gained something far greater, a life filled with dignity, laughter, and people who truly cared. In the end, that was the real revenge, proving love is stronger than cruelty. If you've ever had to fight for someone others cast aside, know that your voice matters. Share your story in the comments, I'd love to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice served in unexpected ways.